All right. Very excited. This is our second Words of Wisdom. We do have Joanne on here, and she's finishing up eating, and so then she's going to join us. And our co-host today is Tamara. And
Hello.
she was she was just saying, I said yes, and then I didn't know what I got myself into. So I'll tell you about the history of this. This was actually kind of born from oh, we got two people watching us on was kind of came out of a discussion, and I've been thinking about it a long time about how we are in this we are trying to learn how to be in groups and work with each other and look at this evolution of man. And the only way we have to connect really is words. I personally think eventually we're moving to telepathic and we have all kinds of other things, but it is words that catch us, and it is words that we have different agreements around. And so one night in a class, we had a big discussion about words and what they meant and our agreements around them. And we said we should have this discussion all the time because it's an ever evolving issue as we move through and we become more aware of our life. And I do have a quote that I'd like to share that I thought was pretty evident. It's by Paulo, I hope I say the name wrong, Coelho, and it says, maybe this journey of words isn't so much about becoming anything. Maybe it's about unbecoming everything that isn't really you, so you can be who you were meant to be in the first place, and we can meet. And so I that is really what this idea is, just to discuss words. I'm asking a co-host every month to talk a little bit about who they are and what they and Tamara and I and Teresa, we have no problem having conversations about words. And Joanne, no problems about having conversations about words. You are all welcome to join us on the Zoom, or if you wish to stay, I will be monitoring the conversation. Oh, here's Barbara. She's joining us. Yay, Barbara. I'm glad Barbara was on our first session. I actually did tag everybody who came to our first session. And so I'm going to have you start, Tamara, just kind of introducing who you are and what you do and kind of some of your thoughts, even about how you use words in what you do. So,
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for having me a part of the experience this evening. I appreciate it. And thank you for everybody who's on our Zoom and watching on Facebook Live. This is a nice moment to get together and share some wisdom with everybody and get everybody else's take too. So I appreciate being a part of this. For those of you who don't know, my name is Tamara Cassio. I run an online spiritual wellness counseling lifestyle business. So I help those bridge the gap to where they currently are to wherever it is they want to be. Most of my clients have already gone through an awakening process or in the beginning stages of it. So it's kind of a range, but everybody's pretty much aware of energy and ascension and, the mysteries of the universe. So I kind of help them navigate through that process. And as we know, that process repeats itself, right? We're going on the spiral, ascending upwards back to source. And as we start coming back around again, we repeat or we see things that we've already confronted or already dealt with. And it's just in a different manner. It's for something to learn something else or to get this one more glimpse at it to see how we're going to respond to it this time, right? So I kind of help people navigate through that. Different modalities that we use depending on what the needs are. Yoga and meditation are the two main ones. Those are my passion. Talk therapy, using words, right? Listening to the definitions and the conditions around how they speak, how it's usually the self-talk. So that sort of stuff. Spirit readings, we always allow spirit to come in and guide all the sessions and kind of take us on the journey of what that individual is needing in the moment or what is meant for them to know and be told in that moment. So it's every session's unique, and I love it for that reason because you get so much. We're both, Kitty, you know this, I'm sure, when you're in a session with somebody and you're reading your chart or you're giving a spirit reading, the upgrade, the activations that you're receiving from that individual, right? That connection that you establish is what is so amazing in the situations like this. So yeah, so that's basically what I do. And then jump on Friends podcast and videos like this to share in moments. But I think it's this interesting topic. The first thing that came to mind was we use words all the time, like Kitty had mentioned. However, I don't think we realize that we're actually casting spells as we're saying it. That's why they call it spelling, right? That's the original term, right? Your words are creating your existence, your manifestation with the energy behind it, right? That's why the definitions that one person has attached to a word is completely different meaning than what other people have. And one of the biggest words that I've come across in my experience so far is God. So many different energies and meanings and labels around God as a word. So I always ask before every session, are you comfortable with the word God? Is there another word that you would feel most comfortable with using instead because of the connotations that have been attached to it? Do you experience the same thing, Kitty?
You call it the agreements we have in it. And it's interesting because I was a person who used the word God a lot. And then I was very aware that I had my limitations around the word God. I had a very born and raised Irish Catholic uncle who was a priest. We used to play mass, had May crownings, every Catholic thing you could come up with, we were doing. And, and so I have decided that my agreement around God is the word source. And I've come to believe, for me, source, when I say God, I have a limitation in my head that it is separate from me. But when I say source, I can really think of the electricity, of the circuitry, of the other pieces for me that source opens up. And it isn't that I don't enjoy God, but I often will now correct in my head, if there's a prayer, I will change it to the word source because it has an agreement. And that's what this whole discussion is about, our agreements around words. Anybody else on this panel want to talk? We have 8 people watching us, so please feel free to jump in. I'm happy to share what you have to say. This is a discussion about words, and I love this one already. God.
So what's interesting I'm comfortable with utilizing the word God. I use it in my prayers. I use it in my conversations. But when somebody else says it, I don't know them, or I'm learning, or I'm watching a new whatever, and I'm instantly in defense. I've recognized of what is their meaning of God? Is it some man sitting up in a chair up in the clouds that is dictating, right? Or is it an evolved perception? What is their meaning around this word? So it definitely activates something within me when I hear other people say the word. But for me, I'm comfortable with it because I know what my meaning is. It means source, right? So yeah,
It's that, and that's what we're here, we're talking about our agreements about words so that when we go out and we come back in another month, what have we noticed about words? The one we talked about last time was I asked people to look at how many times they use but and see if they can use and, because but negates what was you said before. And there are sometimes but is appropriate. Most of the time it's and. So let's talk about God's source. How about you, Joanne? I know you got something to say.
I sure do. Going back when I wrote my first book, Healing Within Meditation, in the book, I reference universe a lot. And the woman who was editing the book, she had said to me, well, you may want to put in parentheses God, because not everybody may be able to resonate with universe, and they may not want to read the book because you don't specify God. I was like, oh, I said, I never really thought about it, because again, let's see, my mom was Protestant. My dad is Catholic. Therefore, my dad went to church. And my mom believes she can go outside into her garden, she can sit in the house, she can stay in her bed, and she can connect with God everywhere and anywhere. So that was her belief. And I sort of took on both beliefs in regards that I don't necessarily need to go theoretically to temple to connect with God. And I'm okay with going to temple if need to connect with God. But I really use the word universe when speaking, or even my higher power is a word I refer to as well. My
I like
higher
higher
power,
power. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
and that's something that I refer to. And just like you, Tamara, when I work with clients, I always ask them, you know, what are they more comfortable with? Is it universe, God, source? Some people come out and surprise me and they tree. I'm like, oh,
I haven't had that yet.
I'm like, oh, okay, we could do that. We can connect, and basically what they're basically saying is nature, that
Yeah.
they just refer to nature as their higher power. I'm like, okay, I can do that, and just be open to all the different possibilities of how people do connect or what words they do use when referring to something higher than oneself. And as long as we all believe and agree that there is someone or something higher than all of us that we can look towards in guidance.
Well, and see, that is actually why I use source, because I am really, and this is a radical shift for me, understanding it's not above me, it's in me. And
Mm.
I use source because in my head, I was projecting for me, and this is just me. Again, this is about what is happening between our ears too, even in this discussion, that I was looking for something outside of me to have the answers. And for me, if I look at source, then I know it's coming
From
through me,
within. That's
from within.
brilliant. Yeah, I like that. That's brilliant.
And because I'm going to tell you, the biggest critic I own lives from here to here. And I'm making such friends with that source. If source is me, I am made in the image of source, or am I source? I am a direct descendant of source. I think more and more about DNA and the electrical currents. And so for me, this is my limitation on the word God. I'm aware of it. It felt still like it was about me, not through me. And I'm coming to understand for me that it is in me. I am it, it is me. I am that I am.
You are. Yep.
What the great I am. How about you, Teresa? What do you think about source, God, all of those? It just helped me break away categories.
I guess I use the term God, but that has changed over the years from when I was younger and being raised Catholic, and thinking of God as someone who could also punish me or judges me. So over the years, I think I use the term God, but I think of it as a higher power or a higher level than human on earth, if that makes sense. But I like what you say about it's within you. But I guess just for myself, I might use source or universe, but mostly I think of God as someone that's more above or more ascended than I and has more knowledge and power. So.
Yeah, I just it's really interesting. And for those just joining us, we have a couple people that jumped on. This is just a discussion of words. And Tamara had said one of the things in her work with people is she finds out from them what is your thought around this. So that's why we happen to be talking about such a light subject. What do you think? God, source, universe. Yeah, I think of it as something so much more knowledgeable, but that my job is to get in touch with that knowledge. So that's something completely, sometimes that very little Catholic girl in me goes, where's the lightning? you know?
Right.
And so I think that's the other reason I stopped using that, because I had a punishing sense of that there was right and wrong and punishment. And I was, again, that was what was living between my head, you know, that there was somebody up there with an abacus. Oh, you know, keeping some kind of score. And that wasn't helping me move
Mhm.
ahead in or to evolve. And so, which is one reason I'm so fascinated with words. I do realize how much I was trapped in the word God, you know. What are the rules? What are the regulations? So I just changed the words so that I could move my thoughts into other um, thoughts. Barb, you're on here. I know that you got your camera off. I was telling them about your wonderful. Um, this is the lady that was at the Van Gogh display.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and she's choking. So let me call on her because she's choking.
Sorry, yeah. I guess I don't know where my water bottle go. I've got the camera off because it'd be all dark if you wouldn't be able to see me anyway. Because I am
Are you there?
driving, but
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
You faded out there. So what is your thought about that particular word?
Okay, is that better? I'll hold it.
yes.
Yes, it is.
The God, the word God for me ties me back to that idea or the ideology of religion and
Yep.
the confines of that, which is, I think, what I, early on sort of pulled away from, because I found that to be somewhat hypocritical in the way pedagogy was sort of saying how things needed to be and how we needed to think, and the way we needed to be, and yet people weren't being that. And I always used to think, well, just because you go to church on Sunday morning, and you or whatever, and then you go out in the street and some of these people that are so pious in church are really not that compassionate when it comes to real life. So I always found that a bit of a conundrum. So, for that reason, I've sort of drawn away from that word. So for me, and I love what you said, Kitty, about source being, it brings in the circuitry and the energy of that. And yet for me, the idea of source, again, is a pinpoint. It's a beginning. So I like the word universe for me because it's more that it's universal. It's comprehensive. It's everywhere at the same time, and without it being a beginning point. So that's the only differentiation I would make. I tend to use the word universe now. I've struggled with that over the years, but as of late, it's really become, or great spirit. I sort of lean towards some of the indigenous
Oh, I like
terms.
that one too.
Yeah,
Great
too.
spirit.
Just great spirit or Gitche Manitou. It's whoever, whatever. It's that spirit, the spirit of energy that is part of all of us. And I was going to say, I loved, Tamara, what you said at the beginning about spelling and how we are casting spells. I've never thought of it that way. So that's a really great distinction. And I have found myself sort of dissecting words like that as of late
Nice.
to sort of, take a word and sort of dissect it into its elements, and it changes the meaning for me. It deepens it, it broadens it. Sometimes it becomes something else altogether. So the meaning of words, as you say, is so, it can be expansive, it can be specific, but it's something different for everybody and how each person interprets those words. And the idea of spell casting, we always think of spells as, witchery, or, brought up to think that as as opposed to, and yet everybody over time has used words to, as you say, cast spells. And when you think about it, we were use the word spell binding, you know, to describe a really good book. You know, because it really is, it binds us to the story. And all these stories are, and how the voices that they are spoken in changes the meaning and the, so in the whole idea of storytelling and becoming spells, as if we go back to societies before written word, and things were handed down by the word, by repeating and learning the stories.
Well, and those
And
stories saved
spreading
lives.
spreading the word.
Yeah.
Pardon? Yeah.
Stories saved lives. I mean, one of the stories I remember
Yeah.
most was in a small village when the big tsunami came through. My son was 10, so it was 2004. There was a whole island they expected to be wiped out. And when they got there, everybody was fine because a story had been handed down. They came to rescue them about that if the water went out, everyone, the great spirit was going to be sending in something. Everyone needed to go to the hill. So they took all of their animals, and that's where they were when the tsunami hit. So, yeah.
And there we go.
Yeah, I love the idea of it's a spell casting. And
Yeah.
that's why we don't always know the agreements people have. I love that you pointed out, Tamara. I don't really know when somebody says God, if they have a set of rules and this, if I have something different, I don't understand God, or is it that we have this exchange of energy and things coming through to us? So that's a really interesting thought, how we cast the spells with our words. And we know that so much of our communication is nonverbal. It's how we deliver those words, you know. And so when somebody says, people can say, I love God, or I love God. Like
Well, love is another word. Love is another loaded word as well, that we have all kinds of agreements around that we're not even aware that we've created around it, right? That's the other word that comes up in my sessions, almost every client, because of what what it means to love their child, or what it means to love their spouse, or to love their parent, right? They have all these unwritten binding agreements around that word that we really have to work through and unravel to get to the source, what love really is to them, and in a healthy way. So love is
some of that
another
is
word.
related to God too.
Yeah.
Because how they were told as a child of God and the rules and what a good person was. Yeah, love becomes the next one related to me to source, a few of you know that I have started to work with, this is called blue quartz, blue rose quartz. And instead of universal love, which is what rose quartz is supposed to be, unconditional love, this is unconditional affection. And many of us can deal with affection before we can deal with the word love. And isn't that interesting? I am that way because love has hurt at times or felt constricting, my definition of it. And yet affection, I can identify how I feel about puppies and babies and flowers and the ocean and affection. And so, yeah, so let's talk about love too in relation to source. What the heck? Let's just pick big ideas because these are what we look at when we start talking. And again, a lot of this is about the conversations in our head. If we don't put them,
it's all what that is, right? And going back to that casting of the spells, when you're speaking of yourself over and over and over again with emotion attached to it, you are casting a spell on yourself. If you're saying, oh, that was so stupid of me, or you say that constantly, you are programming that vibration within you. So yeah, that's the other thing. It's all these words have vibrations to them. Every word has a different vibration, and depending on how you're using it and what agreements you have around it, you're affecting your energy by utilizing those words for sure.
Mhm. Very much. And what do I, you know, sometimes when I've said to myself, I love myself, there's a voice in me going, no, you don't. Mm-mm.
Exactly, right.
How many,
Yeah.
if you guys all said that to yourself right now, I love myself, what list comes for? Do you have a but? But I wish I would. Do you have a condition on it? You know,
An expectation for sure. You think of how many expectations are around the word love or the,
Well,
you know.
I think that's a big one in regards to the expectation regarding what someone experiences with the word love. You know, if 1 minute someone is saying that they love that person, and then the next minute that same person who just got them saying I love you disappoints that person, it goes into the mindset of like, well, if you love me, why would you disappoint me? So it's the conditioning that we hold on to in reference to the experiences that we remember after hearing the words love.
right.
For sure, yes.
And it's that assumption about that we have that if somebody loved me, they wouldn't disappoint me. Is that really true?
No.
No.
No,
Marilyn said, question is source love? Is God love? Is the universe love?
Well, depending on what your definition of love is, I would say yes. But again, it goes around whatever that means to you, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm. And
and if you think about it, and I've actually did a survey on this a while back in regards to how many people out there, based on parents to children, never actually hear their parents say, I love you. That when they actually do hear that word, like I had a client many years back, I adored her. And every so often I would actually say to her how much I loved her. And she was taken back by the fact that I said I loved her. And she just looked at me and I could see on her face, an older woman, older than me, and I could see on her face that it was the first time she's actually heard those words used in that content. And she goes, you love me? I'm like, of course I love you. I was like, you're dear to my heart. And then we opened up a conversation about the fact that she's never experienced someone using those words. Her parents never said they loved her. She never heard her parents say those words to each other. And her husband never used those words. So there are so many people out there that never really get to experience the word love. Nevertheless, I love you.
yeah. And see, and I grew up with a father who closed every conversation with that. Love you, doll. That's what he did. And, you know, feeling blessed, but I haven't always thought about, is God love? My definition of God wasn't always loving. If God was loving, then why is he keeping a tally up there? So I did wrestle with it, which is another reason I adapted source. Was I do believe that source there's a beauty to it. I don't know if I would call it just love. It's a really, again, what is my limit? And then that's the other thing that words limits us as to how do we explain that and how do I take this feeling here and bring it out here. That's what the issue for love is. You know, I love this person. I also love myself. And what happens when those loves seem to be opposed? Or is that my
Well, that's
expectation?
where the definition of what love means to you comes in, right? So you can have this and still have love for sure.
Mhm.
It's like when you have a child, right? Your 2-year-old is, you know, telling you they didn't eat the cookies and they got chocolate all over their face. You guys are doing this. The love doesn't change any just because you're in a moment with them. I think that's as we have different relationships, we start to change the meaning of love depending on what that relationship is. But if love is acceptance of what is, then
Well,
even
is
during
love the
grief.
acceptance of what is? I mean, that's a big piece of it. Yeah, it does. It changes. And how do I put other feelings with love and source? I go back to what did I believe at one time about source and God? If God is love and source is love, then I must not be very good because I can't be all of that. So it becomes this understanding sometimes of what is beyond me. And
Yeah.
and that's why we talk about words. We have, as we're all trying to figure out how to walk this path together, we all have different backgrounds. I mean, I know there are people out there, I have heard them talk about, well, if you loved me, you would do that. My mother used to say this very jokingly, how much do you love me? This is my mother that passed away when I was 12. And I'd say, enough to make you a cup of coffee. Now, my mother honestly would drink tap water, hot water, and Maxwell House instant coffee. But she actually asked that. And as a kid, I thought, oh, well, then you do things for people for love. Do you? You know, again, these are those interesting agreements we start to
Yep.
take a look at. And then what does that do for so how many times has the conversation in your head been around love
Oh,
and yourself?
lots.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots. Just wrestling with that. That's a huge chunk of the internal conversations. Yeah.
Mhm.
Ever since a child, right? Like, oh, do they still love me because I'm in trouble now? Or as you grow older, if I don't do this, this and that, are they going to love me? Yeah, all of that. And then you also got to remember some of this is coming over from past lives too, right? That you're carrying over definitions. That's where the unwritten agreements come from that you're not even aware that you have around things. So yeah, it gets quite deep.
Yeah, it really does.
I was going to say too, how definition of love can change throughout the stages of your life. As a child or a teen or a young person. And then when you have children or you get married or aging parents, how your word and your knowledge of love can change, and how I thought of love when I was in my 30s and how I think of love in the age I am now is different, and how it's evolved and matured and takes on different meanings.
You
And has
peeled back
grown.
layers, right? You peeled back
Right.
layers and undid some of those programmings and allowed it to be a little bit more raw and a little bit more closer to source, right? As we get older, I think happens. Yeah.
And it does go back to source. What is, because I've had a source that's up there managing me, I thought. And now I'm thinking, well, if it's really in me, then let's have a better conversation for me, a more loving conversation, because I haven't learned to love myself. I've learned to punish myself. I've learned to hold myself responsible, but loving myself is it's scarier concept, unconditional love.
It is.
And
When we think of when we like with Kitty saying that she's learned to punish herself, she learned to judge herself. I mean, in reality of it all is who defined what love actually really is. I mean, you could very well love yourself just as well as you sit there judging yourself. That sense of judgment could be a sense of love on how you sit there in that space of, well, this is how I feel about me. Because I think deep down we all love ourselves, just that we have this definition to what love really is, and whose definition is really right.
Correct. I agree.
When we think about it.
Marsha's joining us. She was in the last one. Okay, Marsha, if you want to come on camera. We're having just a light subject about words, God and love. just to make it light, okay? Kit Kat said, my mom gave affection. My dad bought us everything we wanted. I always felt like I had the best of both worlds growing up. So that's pretty good. And that's nice to have that feeling. And I wonder, I'm going to ask you, Kat, I'm going to throw you right under the bus. Do you think you love yourself all the time with whatever definition they gave you? You had a good, because I know part of what I'm learning to do with my words is be very careful of what I'm creating outside. Is it loving? Is it where I think source wants me to be? Because I want to be one with source. And Kat says, absolutely not. Love. yeah, so one reason we put it out here is so we can look at how is it traveling in here?
Yeah. So it's interesting that Kat brought up the affection part, right? My grandmother was not affectionate, but I have never felt more love from a person than I have from her. And she wasn't affectionate, right? She didn't kiss and hold and all those, but she produced a level of safety and security and consistency that felt like love to me, right? So yeah, it's definitely on a spectrum. Love is definitely on a spectrum, right? As we go through our journey.
I think that's one reason I want to work with affection. It
Mm.
feels more comfortable. I'm less clear. I want to live a loving life. But I'm less clear what that can look like. And what do I do with anger, jealousy? Some of the other ones that don't feel loving. So it's interesting. And I'm going back to source for me, how I felt source wanted me to be, God wanted me to be. And as I change that definition, I'm much more aware of, for me, more space with other people and what their definitions are. But I don't know always what they are when they say love. Some people have rules with love.
Yeah.
Yes, very much.
For me, I practice this process called that we do in Reiki. Just for today, I love myself exactly how I am, just for today. So however I show up today, I love myself just that way. I'm not looking to be any, I'll use the word perfect. I'm gonna love myself just as I am right now, in this moment. And then in the next moment, I will do another sort of review and say, I love myself just as I am right now. And I'm always in that state. And I've always believed, for me, I've always loved myself. I think I fall in love with myself every single day more and more. And just being, transparent and allowing myself just to be who I am without any expectations of being something more. Hold on, I'm gonna cough.
So she's gonna cough. Think spirit's telling her something, as she says.
Didn't want it to be on the recording. So yeah, so I just learned to love myself just exactly how I am each and every day, showing up.
Marcia, you wanted to say something, then I'm going to read you what Kat said.
I don't remember what I was getting ready to say, but I learned a lesson last week in love, about love, and not love. One of my cousins posted a picture of our great grandmother's noodle pot, and she had made beef and noodles, and she's like, I hope I do, Mom O'Brien justice. And then she posted a picture of when she was a child, cutest little thing. But the sad thing about it is, she and her younger sister had to live out in the shed because their stepmother wouldn't let them live in the house. So and let me tell you, this woman was vibrant and loving, and she would take anybody in. But she learned that from the ladies in the neighborhood who taught her to quilt and how to cook and how to be a kind person. So for me, that was really eye-opening last week to know that the reason why she was the way she was, and luckily I knew her till I was 12. But that's how she became the way she was. And I just have such even a more divine love for her than I did before, because like she was my be all end all. And she was the poo. She would put on waders and go in the river and fish. Like she was that chick. So like to learn her
There's
part
affection.
and what she did to love others in the family who might not have had an easy time as well, that was really impactful for me last week when I read that.
Oh wow, that's really interesting. I'm going to read what Kat had to say. She had said absolutely not. She said, I'm a work in progress. Granting myself unconditional love. I think that's an important line. Granting myself, like realizing. She said, we never said love. Later in life, my sister actually started saying it to everyone, and we all followed along and learned to say it. It was like it was embarrassing for us to say, I love you. And that is part of what we're trying to figure out. How do we create, like your she said was your aunt,
My great grandmother.
your great grandmother. How do we create that kind of life to live no matter where we came from or what we're around? How do we send that out so everyone can access it? In this great Aquarian time, it is about what's the ideal? How do we get it out there and create it? And I love that Marilyn said your cycle has changed. You change your cycle in doing this. And how do we, you guys have any stories of something you've done that really changed, like how you looked at it, how you said it, something consciously that you've done? Somebody better have something, otherwise it's going to be. Go ahead, Joanne.
And I know this is live and my husband will probably kill me, but that's okay. The experience of the unconditional love. With the story of my husband and I, without going all into detail, I know him since I'm 16. We've been in and out of each other's lives more times than I can count. We got married 10 years ago. We have a daughter who is going to be 30. You guys do the maths. And just going and understanding his journey that he's on. And coming to that point one day and saying to myself, I love this man unconditionally. There is absolutely nothing this man can do that can make me see him less than what he is, because he's got such a warm, kind heart inside that I get to see. So when people sit there and say, well, how do you know you love him unconditionally? Because I do. There's no conditions. There's absolutely nothing this man can do that is going to get me to the point where I don't love him. It's an unconditional love that just allows the relationship to go the way the relationship goes. And it gives me this ability to know, like, wow, I can really love. And it's not a child, because theoretically, those of us who have children, it's like we love our children unconditionally. Not all the time. Sometimes it's like, damn,
Well,
loving.
but there's another word, unconditional. Does unconditional, I can love somebody unconditional, but not live with them.
Correct. Yes.
And so,
Yes.
and that becomes, this is that interesting part of words. So thank you, Joanne, for this story.
Yeah, that's a good one, because love can be unconditional, but relationships typically are conditional, right? And you don't need to be in the relationship to still have the love. So those are two different scenarios for sure. And the word unconditional, that's a good point.
Unconditional, isn't it funny? Unconditional puts a condition on.
There's no conditions.
In its very nature, because then we have a different agreement. What does unconditional means? Does it mean I take everything? Or does it mean I still have the feeling? So I'm not answering that question. Absolutely not. So,
I mean, for me, because again, like I just stated, that this unconditional love that I share for my husband, there is no condition. There's absolutely no condition. There's no definition to it. I love this man, no matter what. No matter what. There's no, well, what if this? What if this? I forget the name of the song. Something about you could do 1,000 things wrong, but that one thing that you do right, I'm going to focus on that one thing you do right. And that's really what it comes down to, is that when you love somebody with no conditions, you're not looking at all of their faults. You're looking at who they are and how they shine. And you stay focused on that. And that, to me, is the unconditional love of it.
Right. But that doesn't always mean you live with them either. I'm not saying for you, but for some people, I can still love you, but I can love you from a distance.
Of course, sure. Yeah, of course. I think from my experience, it's basically the unconditional love of being with this person, living with this person, and being able to, no matter what, having that where I get to see.
Yes, these are interesting, because these are our agreements. These are beyond the words, what it energetically feels like for you, and it becomes limiting for you to explain that. And Robin says, my mother was never told she was loved, so she never told us. She started telling every single time I saw her, and eventually she started saying it back. She just turned 80 and thanked me for it.
Wow, that's a huge testimony there. Wow.
Right. And again, our words are our spells. I love that, Tamara. I'm going to walk away with that little gem. They cast spells. And even words like unconditional love, I
Yep.
love I love, there we go. That Kat said, how did she put it? I love the way she said it. I'm still a work in progress, granting myself that. Granting what is that going to look like between this part of me and this part of me in my conversation. And I have learned in loving someone to let go of their faults. It doesn't mean I'm always going to stay and do whatever, but it isn't about fixing them. They're not going to arrive because I'm never going to arrive, you know. And so this is a fascinating conversation, and I go back to source. I had to separate myself from that limiting view in order for me to access unconditional love, because I had rules and regulations and I was so busy following rules, I was never just being.
Oh, I
And
understand.
I think it's also, as Robin says, and most of us have said it too, we have an expectation to, if I say to somebody, I love you, and that person has never experienced those words, they've never had an opportunity to hear it themselves, so they don't really know what that is. So I can't possibly have an expectation and get upset with a person who's never experienced it. It's like if you weren't taught how, like we all can agree that there's no parenting book out there. And considering there's lots of publishers out there these days, I mean, there's so many people self-publishing, I'm one of them. You would think somebody at this point in time would write a parenting book to like, what's the right, the do's and don'ts and whatever not, but there isn't one. So theoretically, if you think of it as, there is no rule. So there's no specific guidelines to how a person shows up in their way of loving, or how a person shows up in whatever actions they do. And it's up to us to be able to teach them. So if I want someone to love me, I'm going to teach you how to love me. Because you may not know how to love me, because you might have not been taught. If you had to be that person who had to fend for yourself at the age of 6, because both parents were either busy or passed on, whatever the case is, you didn't get that parenting of the caring and nurturing. So now hopefully somewhere along the line you meet people that's going to bring that in to teach you that. And I think that's a big part of it, is that there isn't a rule book that says how to do it and if we're doing it right or wrong. So if we can accept that person, like this is one of my favorite expressions, I forget who said it. The person is showing up the best way they know how. The person is showing up the best way they know how. And if we can recognize that, hey, you know what? If that's the best way they can show up today, I accept it. And it takes away all the judgment and all the expectations too. Well, I expected you to show up this way. Well, damn, I don't know how to show up that way. Sorry. You know?
Yeah, that's a word there's another word that I like.
Sorry.
Sorry. Because when as kids, well, that's another whole show actually. The word sorry and apologize.
Sorry, not sorry.
Not really sorry. I apologize. I have compassion that you wanted me to be this. I don't know how to be this. I've become much more comfortable with saying words like I have compassion versus sorry about that, because I'm not really sorry. I'm not going to change my behavior. I have compassion that this was difficult, and that, that line in the movie, I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy asking her to love me. A very good friend of mine over there, we read the book, The Love Languages together. That was fascinating to know that people have natural ways they express love. Some people, according to this, some people give gifts. Some people do service. Okay, help me, Teresa.
Words of affirmation.
Words of affirmation. There's another
Quality
one.
time.
Quality time. Yes.
And again, that's just somebody's putting love into categories, right? So just
Right.
because there's been a book written about it, and just because that doesn't mean that it's all encompassing. We're still just talking about each individual's definition of love. So,
and it just gives you something to think about, though.
Absolutely it does. Yes,
Yeah,
but don't limit it, right?
Again,
don't limit it
our
to those categories.
right. Our agreements might not be, it might not be that we're not loving each other. We just might not understand how each of us, because how many of us have had a real conversation about how we love? I mean, really, unless we were figuring something out, where we sat down and thought, how do I like love? You know, we kind of, there is an assumption, there goes that expectations and assumption, just like people using the words God, source, universe, that I understand what you mean when you say love, that I understand what you mean when you say God. And that's part of this new human journey, is figuring. That's why I want to do this program. Let's talk about words. Let's think about them. Let's go back and be very aware that there's no assumption here that I know what you mean. In the book, The Fifth Agreement, is be skeptical. And the skeptical is, do I really understand what you're saying? And learn to listen. Kat said, I remember getting upset when my dad and I yelled, all you do is buy us stuff. And mom told me I hurt his feelings because that's the way he learned how to love, you know. And
But that's
so,
okay too, that you spoke your truth, right? And love doesn't always have to be rainbows and butterflies, right? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say something that might come across harsh or whatnot, but it serves a purpose. I guarantee you, if his feelings were hurt, he had to look within, right? He had to question how he loves, and it had to make him go a little bit deeper within himself. So
right.
that
And
could have been the highest form of love he's ever received from anybody, is speaking that kind of truth. So you don't know.
and where does it say love doesn't hurt? We don't hurt
Right.
sometimes, because there's that personal part, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that how
So
how
I sat in on there was a Swami that came into a Hindu temple here nearby, and I sat in for the week-long lecture, and love was a part of it. And he had given an example of a giraffe. A mother giraffe gives birth standing up, and that baby drops, 6 feet or however many feet to the ground, okay? And she kicks it immediately to get that baby up. So as an on-gut looker, you're like, oh my gosh, how terrible. But that is love, because if she doesn't do that, that baby's gonna get in, right? So we would look at that as humans and be like, you can't kick that baby, that's not loving. But in reality, that is love, because she's protecting that baby, right? So those conditions that we have on what love is, it goes deep.
boundaries are loving.
Exactly.
Well, it's the same thing too when a baby's born. I mean, what is the first thing most doctors do when a baby's born? Usually they get smacked in the butt to get them to cry, to get them to take that first breath. If you think about it, it's like, why would you smack a baby when it's first born? To get that energy going, you know?
Yeah,
So
I don't know if
again,
the doctor loves the baby though. I don't know.
well, yeah, but it's just the whole concept of like, that's theoretically the first, I don't know, action that a newborn gets when they first take their breath, is they get smacked most of the time.
Well,
Unless
unless
they're,
they're born in water, there's
Yeah.
all kinds. Yeah.
and then
Yeah,
then there's
I
a
don't think that's
different,
everybody's experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
But right, but it's the idea was take the breath, do the
to get the
whatever.
breath.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
you know, it again, this is this whole thing. Oh, let me look at what I understand, versus what I think you're saying. You know, I look forward to when we can telepathically really like connect that way, and we don't have to try to, because words, as much as they join us, also separate us.
But I think that's a good point what you just said. And it goes back to one of the agreements, right? Not to assume and take things personally either. To ask. Don't assume what they're saying, that you know what they mean. Because you probably don't know their definition of what they're saying. So to ask those questions to clarify, I think that's a really good point, Kitty.
Yeah. Well, I used to say to my students, ask, answer, seek knowledge. That's what it spells. You know, you want an answer, you don't know what's going on, and you're dealing with your own reaction to something. So in that moment, I don't know about anybody else, but sometimes I'm like, you know, what's going on? And so, yeah, remembering to ask and to not assume. We all know what that spells out. And yeah, and just just the concept of love alone. You know, there are books and, songs and posters and paintings and things looking at love, looking at God, looking at source. We picked two real light words this time.
Yeah, leave it to me to go deep, that's
Well, but these are what we say we put our life around.
exactly, yes. Yep, it's exactly right.
And,
And
go
I
ahead.
think too, as we get older, our definition of love changes.
Mhm.
Like when I was in my 20s, I was all about making sure all my friends were happy and, everybody was just good. I didn't love myself enough to include myself in the good. But as I got older and I started seeing things just differently in the world, I'm just like, I need to include myself in the good. They're fine now. So like my definition of how I love them now versus how I did in my 20s is completely different.
Yeah.
Teresa had made a similar point to that, and I agree fully.
Yeah.
And it's as you peel away those layers of what those definitions meant, and you change it as you grow and mature, and yeah, that's a great point.
All right, so we got 5 minutes, so I'm going to get in the habit of at the end of it just to do a little round robin. Barb sent me a message that said I went into a black spot, so she's online now out
Okay.
here. Just kind of any takeaway that you have. So let me see who wants to volunteer, or I can be the teacher and pick somebody to go.
Oh, Mrs. Foss.
Yes, so I'm going to pick Teresa. So Teresa, tell me a takeaway or something you've thought about because of the conversation with words.
I think in the beginning, how everybody defines God, source, universe, it's even expanded my thoughts about what I think about God or universe, or what I use for a higher power, and just all the things that go into that in my thinking when I hear the word God, universe, or source, or spiritual, anything like that. It makes me think about that more, and just where I came from in my learnings growing up of what God is, and then how I expanded that. But yeah, just more knowledge of what I would call God, and if I continue to say that, or if I'm going to use another term. That was a good discussion, I think, for me.
All right, how about you, Joanne?
I think I think my takeaway, and I think Kitty said this earlier, when I'm going to say 90% of the population is more intuitive and empathic, where we are all very sensitive, where we're just really able to embrace in everyone just being who they are, and however, whatever, whomever they refer to as their higher source, and how they present themselves and show off and demonstrate love. I think over time, it will just be something we'll just know. We'll just know. We won't need to ask because we'll just know. We'll just be able to feel into the energies that will all just be one, and it's just one source of everything. So that's just really my takeaway.
Thank you. I love Marilyn wrote, you evolve in this world called life. I like that. That's a nice summation. How about you, Marcia? I know you were on for the whole thing.
Honestly, a lot of times I am more aware of the words that I pick with my patients because, for whatever they have going on, because I work on a spinal cord unit, when they get angry and they want to be angry with me, I remind myself, this is the only thing they can control right now is their words. So I try to look at everything from their level of their control so I can be more compassionate of the words that I speak back to them when they do get mad, and give them a little bit of positivity. So I'm just trying to be more aware of how and what I say back to my patients.
That's a very loving, I love that.
I love that.
I
That was
do
a
too.
beautiful way to end, wasn't that? That was great.
Oh, no, Tamara, you got your takeaway. I got my takeaway too, but.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't mind sharing a takeaway. I just thought that was
I
really
love
beautiful.
that, Marcia. I love that.
Yeah.
That is, to me, another kind of definition of understanding love. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah. Okay, Tamara, you're up.
My takeaway from tonight is the reinforcement of how these words are loaded, and how we think they're universal and they're just not. They have so many more layers and so many more meanings. And I'm taking away to ask questions more and not to assume that I know what they're saying. And I'm going to work on becoming defensive when I hear somebody else use the word God, and not just assume that they're talking about it in a religious aspect, that maybe, just maybe, they actually have a relationship with source and they're just using the word God. So those are my two takeaways: to ask questions because words are loaded and everybody has a different meaning attached to them, and to really look in words on my defense towards other people using the word God.
I like that. And mine is, you guys did a really nice job of helping me go back to my limitations on love were some of my limitations that I had thought of divine God source, their rules. And, you know, whether they aren't being loving was just as unloving as I was with the God, oh, I'm not being good. So really opening that up and saying, maybe this is their version of this. So being a little more open to that. And I like Robin wrote, we can insert love even into the toughest situations. We can insert God, higher source. We can take that time to step back and say, do I really know what these words mean? So there we are, 9 o'clock on the dot. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you all very much. Next month, Nancy Nan will be my co-host. Please come back. If you have any ideas for words you want to talk about, send them in. And I want to thank everybody who came on tonight and bravely talked about it. And we will see you next month. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thank you.